Pascal. Okay,
Yeah, that's it.
Pascal. Okay.
I know. That's very unique.
I love it. I love it. Okay, here we go. Well, hello there, viewers. I'm so glad you're joining in today for this amazing interview. I have with me Stephen Pascal. Did I pronounce your name rightly, Stephen?
It was beautiful, Craig. Yeah.
Thank you. So I have with me today Stephen Pascal. He's the CEO and founding partner at Griffin Leadership Group. And he's going to talk to us, and we're going to have this conversation on the importance of leadership in building organizations. And I want to request you to grab a cup of coffee if you'd like and just hang around with us for the next few minutes. And I really believe that we're going to have some great value being shared together. And yes, you've got your coffee, Stephen.
I've
Fantastic.
got
Thank you
it.
for joining and today.
I'm following your lead, Craig, and yeah, I'm just really pleased to see you again. It's been a while, and I've loved to follow the things that you're doing in your world and just the impact that you're having. And so I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. So
Yes.
thank you for hosting.
No, it's my pleasure. Absolutely. Now, I want to ask you this. In your observation, because you've worked with some corporate giants, and yet at the same time you work with mid-sized companies. From your observation, what does the role of leadership play in taking the organization to the next level? Whether it's a mid-sized company or whether it's a large conglomerate. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, it's really interesting because as I've worked with the different organizations, as you've described them, I used to think, Craig, that there's a different kind of leadership in the larger kind of global giants. But what I've observed and learned is that there's no difference, right? Like they're people like you and I, and they show up to their office and they have people problems, they have operational problems, they have sales and marketing problems. They're the same issues, right? And so my viewpoint on that has changed significantly. And so I don't distinguish leadership depending on the size of the organization. And so what I've come to just really land on is the fact that our definition, like not a from the leader's perspective,
Yes.
but from our perspective as employees, from our perspective as just outside observers, there's something that's shifted in their definition of leadership, right? There seems to be this different expectation of what it is that it means to be a leader. What I mean by that is it used to be that leaders of organizations, large and small, they're just there to improve the business and to make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and efficiencies and all that type of stuff. But now there seems to be this change in expectation on more the morality of leadership. Like they're really calling leaders to question on decisions that they're making, and they're really diving into why. And they're paying attention to mistakes that they make. And hey, what's going on there? Because they have this expectation that the leader is more of this moral figure over the organization. And so those are just some of the things that I've been observing, Craig. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah. No, that's so well put, in fact, Stephen. Sometimes I think, the values like integrity, trust. At the end of the day, that's what leadership is all about. It's not about charisma. It's not about trying to create this kind of image in front of people. I
Yeah.
think if you focus on the key aspect of, character and integrity and trust, then people will love you for who you are. It was once like a church pastor once said this. He said, "What's the difference between personality and character?" And he said, "Character is who you are when no one's looking."
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly right. And even helping leaders, like I'm sure you do, but I certainly have conversations with leaders
Mhm.
about like, hey, how are you leading your family? Like, how are you leading in your community? Like, it's not just about showing up to your office in your place of business and all of a sudden you flip a switch and you're leading in your organization. It's like, no, leadership, it's like a lifestyle. It's something that is part of the fabric of all different areas of our lives. If we're if we're blessed to be fathers,
Mhm.
husbands, you
Mhm.
know, like you said, church leaders, leaders in
Mhm.
our
Mhm.
community. We just also happen to be leaders in business. And so
That's so true.
how are we trying to improve ourselves across all of those facets of our lives?
Mm. Yeah. Yes. Uh, I'd like to hear from you on this aspect that a leader is someone who needs to keep growing. It's not like this state that you reach. Okay. I want you to comment on that. The importance of growth, which needs to be a continuous, almost like a habit. I'd love you to say a little bit more on that.
That's an interesting one for me, Craig. And so whenever I facilitate a learning experience for a company, I like to
Mhm.
tell this story, and I'll share it briefly
Mhm.
here, just as a
Mhm.
way to illustrate what I'm thinking. So when I was in the eighth grade, my family and I, we lived in Germany. And this was prior to the formation of the European Union, and so
Yes.
there were official border crossings everywhere. So we lived in the southern part of Germany,
Mhm.
on the border of Germany, France, and Switzerland, and so we would cross
Mhm.
the border regularly. And of course, every time you approach the border back in that day, you know, there'd be armed guards, and there would be like barricades, and then there would be the standard list of questions. It was very controlled. But because we were regularly crossing, my father at the time, he developed a little bit of a relationship with the border crossing official because it was largely the same person.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
this person would then ask the same question.
Mhm.
And the question that he would ask is, do you have anything to declare?
Yeah.
And so the regular answer from my father was no. And it got so regular and repetitive that my dad wouldn't even fully stop at the border. He would just kind of roll through slowly, roll his window down. The
Mhm.
question was asked. My dad would answer no and then carry on until one day something changed.
Mhm.
It was a different border crossing agent,
Mhm. Mhm.
and the border crossing agent asked a different question. But because my father was in such a routine, he rolled his window
And said
down,
no.
rolled slowly through. The question was asked. My father answered no and waved and kept driving. And pretty soon, behind us, there were like three heavily armed guards running after the car, yelling at us for stop to stop. And so, fast forwarding to the end of the story, the question I said was different. And the question this time was, instead of, do you have anything to declare? The question was, can I see your passport?
Oops.
To which my father said
Said
no
no.
and kept driving. Right. And so the reason I love that story, it's a true story. The reason I love it
Mhm.
is because I think it's a good illustration of the the answer to your question. And I think from a leadership growth perspective, what we try to do, I think, as people,
Mhm.
especially in our businesses, we try so hard to make things predictable and repetitive so that we can just, oh, finally, we have a good routine and everyone knows what they need to do. And so you just try to hit that automatic pilot until something changes, right? Because as you know, and as your audience knows, the environment is changing all the time and it's so unpredictable. So why are we trying to make our organization so predictable and the same and repetitive when the environment's always changing? So then when a different question gets asked, if we're not in this rut of repetition, then we're ready for the change. So when the different question is asked, we're paying attention, right? And so from a leadership growth and development perspective, I fear that we try as leaders too hard to like, oh, if only I just get really good and consistent in this,
Mhm.
then I'll be fine. But the more we do that, we just have to be careful because we have to still pay attention. So I think leadership growth and development is more about getting us ready for change. And it's about disrupting, and it's about making sure that we are always refreshing and changing and not paying so much attention to just being repetitive and getting into the same repeatable processes. So those are the things that I think about.
That's very interesting. And it really is. So I want to ask you this now. So on the one hand, you know, you don't want things to be repetitive. Yet at the same time, we find for organizations to grow, the importance of system and processes to be in place. So
Yeah.
I think, so I would like to comment, like, in a sense, do we need to have a balance of both? In a sense, for us to scale, there needs to be a system in place. Yet at the same time, it should not get into a rut. Yeah, I want you to tell us more on that.
Well, there is certainly a balance in that. And the way that I
Mhm.
would distinguish that balance
Mhm.
is it's one thing to have organizational systems. Call them management processes. And so if you think about a more technical organization
Mhm.
that has a stereotypical shop floor with an assembly line, like there, you need to have repeatable systems, don't you? Right? Because
Absolutely.
there has to be a way to control for quality. There has
Mhm.
to be a way to make sure that the one widget is the same as the second and the third and the fourth,
Correct.
right? So from that perspective, there has to be repetitive systems. But when we talk
Yes.
about personal leadership development,
Mhm.
we have to not fall into the trap of thinking that the organizational systems should be the same as the leadership systems. So we have to be constantly training ourselves to pay attention.
Okay.
And as we grow in our leadership, that is rife with change
Mhm.
and growth and the opposite of sameness. But at the same time, training ourselves to pay attention to those things that we would call organizational systems that do need to be repetitive. The other thing that I would say to that is we can't make the mistake as leaders to think that our people are organizational systems. Right? Our
Well said.
people our people are humans and they're growing and developing and changing. And so we have to avoid the trap of trying to make them just repetitive, robotic, repeatable systems. Right. And so that's, I think, the big challenge of leadership is distinguish between the two, and then also to behave differently when we're leading in those two different environments.
Wow. 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 If I would ever ask you, are there any like two or three of leadership principles that you're really like passionate about? You know, these have been some great guide forces for you, or things that you've trained others and you've seen people resonate with you when you shared two or three leadership principles. You could say something on that, it would be great.
I would say that the maybe it's one principle that has several kind of sub
Fair enough.
principles underneath that. But one of the things that I've really had to change in my own life, and it's under the heading of trust.
Mhm.
And whenever I speak to organizations large and small, I always use the theme of trust as kind of an anchor. So, I mean, I talk a lot about as I know that you do with the organizations that you work with, we talk about
Mhm.
learning, we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about
Mhm.
change management and decision making. But those things have to follow a discussion of trust because that needs to be the foundation. What I would say though is underneath that heading of trust, the principle that's really become helpful to me in my own life, but also as I've talked to other leaders, is this idea
Mhm.
of vulnerability.
Mm.
And that's something that is becoming much more of a regular, normal conversation amongst leaders. But it's this idea that the person who's in that leadership seat isn't necessarily there because there's some kind of a shining star. Like they're usually there, and I know that different organizations might not use this language, but they're there by God's grace. They're there because of some 3, 4, or 5 circumstances that fell into place, right? And usually it's a connection of someone else or who they know or
Mhm.
right place, right time.
Mhm.
Now, I'm
Mhm.
not saying that people who are in the leadership seat are not smart. They haven't earned it, like they haven't worked hard for it. That's certainly true. But the reason I share that is because the idea of vulnerability now, it's like, wow, you're in this leadership seat, but you're still a human being and you still
Mm,
have emotions, and you're really no different than the people that you're leading. You just happen to be in that leadership seat. And so for me, the idea of vulnerability is like being able to go to someone that I'm leading and in a position of authority over, and saying things like, wow, you know what? You're a lot better at that than I am. So I want to give this to you. Or saying, wow, you know what? I made a mistake, and owning that and using that as a way to build trust and favor in the organization, because we're all on the same team. We all have different roles, and the person in the leadership seat is just simply holding a role, right? Whereas before, I think even in the last 10 years or so, we've somehow elevated the position of leadership to a place of almost moral superiority, or even superior skill or intellect, or those types of things. But I think nowadays that there's been a bit of a shift to where people in the leadership seat are now going, wow, do I really even want to be here? Right. The responsibility is immense, and the scrutiny, and all of those types of things. And if something goes wrong, I'm always the first person that gets blamed. Like, do I really want this? Right. And so the idea of vulnerability, humility, transparency, authenticity, I think that's what really wins favor, for people, as opposed to, oh, look at me as I straighten my tie. I'm in this leadership seat, and therefore that means that you look at me or speak to me in a different way. So I think, yeah. So again, to put a bow on your question, I think the idea of trust is kind of a
Trust.
main heading, but then underneath that is vulnerability, authenticity, being able to just simply relate to people on a human level, while at the same time moving the organization forward, and claiming the responsibility as being the person who is ultimately accountable for that. I don't think that's ever going away, but I think the way that people lead in that is shifting in a good way.
Yeah. I really love the way you've responded to this question. I mean, I love the journey of trust is like an anchor, you know, and then you have these amazing aspects with its authenticity, with its vulnerability, humility. I love that, you know, going up to someone and saying, you know, you did a fantastic job. I think it's a mature leader and a secure leader who can go and tell someone you're awesome, you know, and not be worried about what, you know, am I looking, is my image going to now appear weak? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
a secure leader is one who will say, you know, go the extra mile and just encourage someone else and just
Yeah.
trust the other person. Yeah, that, hey, it's okay. Even if it goes to your head, whatever. This was my responsibility to encourage someone, and I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Wow.
And Craig, to that point, I've been very impressed by people who have been in leadership positions, who have come to me in my younger days working in organizations, when they've come and apologized for something that was said in a meeting, or they made an error and they came and they owned it, and they said, wow, like I really misrepresented that, and I wanted to apologize, for whatever, but that, all of a sudden it's like, wow, like that speaks such volumes to that person's credibility and character, now to be able to put themselves in that position of humility and vulnerability and come and say, hey, I made a mistake, and then to correct it and own it. And that does nothing, as you can imagine, to build trust, right? So
Absolutely.
the relationship is strengthened, and then all of a sudden every other interaction from then on out has changed for the better.
So true. You know, there's this famous statement in leadership circles, you know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I
Yeah.
think what you just said was just so true, you know, like coming up to a person and just saying, for example, I'm sorry, I messed up in front of a lot of people. I owe you an apology. You know, that makes people realize, okay, you really care for me and you really care for my self-esteem and you really care on the way people look at me.
Yeah.
It, it speaks volumes. It really does. Really does. So I have a question on your organization, Griffin Leadership. Can you tell us the meaning? Does Griffin have a meaning, or how did that word come up? I'm kind of curious to know more on that.
Yeah. So when I started getting opportunities to work with organizations, I was just doing it as myself. But then when I got more and more opportunities, I thought, wow, I think there might be something here that needs a little bit more structure and formality. So I started the process of, what do I call myself, and how do I begin to build a brand that's outside of just like me? Because I've always had visions I enjoy the idea of being a solopreneur and a freelancer, but I love team. And so my vision is to build a team and grow an organization. And so I needed to set the foundation of that. And so I remember sitting around the table for a family dinner one night, and I just asked my family, hey, let's brainstorm. I need a name. And so my youngest son literally just in the blink of an eye just said, how about Griffin?
Okay.
And so, I mean, and it was so random, but I think he had been reading a fictional book or like something. It just kind of came into his mind. And so I said it over and over, and the rest of the family thought it was kind of interesting and unique. And so I started looking up like, what is a griffin? Because I needed it to be something that was legitimate.
Yes.
Right. And so my research led me to the fact that a griffin is like a mythical creature that typically was in a position to stand guard over like a mythical kingdom's treasure.
Okay. I see. Okay.
And so it started to resonate with me, because I thought, wow, really what my role is, I feel, with organizations who entrust their team to me, is, wow, I really feel like I'm in a position to guard the organization's treasure, which is their team and their growth and development as an organization. And so I really started to resonate with that idea. And so that's where the name comes from. And that's kind of hopefully the brand that I'm developing, is this idea, like I said, Craig, of, wow, you're entrusting some experience of learning and growth to me. So I want to guard that, and I want to be a good steward of that. So that's where it comes from.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, now I understood, because I was also kind of curious, what does it mean? But I didn't want to Google it. So let me ask you in person about that. Absolutely. Now tell me, are there kind of key topics that you as an organization, that you carry out in terms of these trainings with companies? Any key aspects of leadership that these are like, your flagship products, if I can use that term? Tell us a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I would probably, so it's a beautiful question, because it's something that is in process, and as I'm learning and growing, and as I'm finding out the different needs of other organizations, I would say generally, Craig, that typically what we do is we do more of what I think is generally understood to be the soft skills, right?
Yes.
Like more communication, leadership development, team dynamics. One of the things that is very important to me, that I'm very passionate about, is this idea of emotional intelligence. And the reason I'm passionate about it is because probably, I want to say 5 or so years ago, I burned out, and went through that process of being off work and having all these questions about like, what's wrong with me, and like, can I not do this, or what am I doing wrong? And someone that was working with me through that process really had a lot of questions around the idea of emotions. And it came to me through those conversations that part of why I was struggling in the way that I was is because I didn't have the emotional skills to be able to respond to difficult situations or conflict. And so because I had a bit of a void in those areas, it led me to become certified in emotional intelligence, because I thought, wow, what a great way to then help other leaders or teams in organizations understand the importance of being emotionally healthy in order to do what it is that they are being held accountable to do. And so emotional intelligence is really it's a topic, but it also gets infused through all of the other topics that I work with organizations in. And so I've done some of the hard skills like sales training, and things like that, but typically it's more on the softer side. And so conflict, communication, but mainly it's around high performing teams. That's kind of the key selling point is organizations who come to me, they're like, okay, we're struggling in some way. We need to level up. Can you help us? Right. And so, yeah, if organizations are, maybe they don't use that word, high performing teams or the words, but that is essentially the product or the service that I offer is in that area.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So currently, do you do the trainings are organized in person? That means you travel to the company, you travel to the organization. Is it like in Vancouver, in Canada, US? What's your, from a geography perspective, like for you currently?
Yeah, the preference definitely is in person. And I've done some online training, but that's, as you know, Craig, I mean, sometimes that can't be helped, but
Yes.
wow, that's difficult, right? Because so much of what you and I do is dependent on the connection that we can make with people. And so it's just so hard to do that well online. I mean, we do it, but it's just hard. That doesn't mean that we don't do it. It's just hard.
Yeah.
And so to get in person, to be able to read body language and understand the emotions of what people are experiencing, just it helps to have a better experience. I've really, my geographic scope is all over North America, including I would say the Caribbean. So Vancouver is where I'm based, but been to New York City, down to Texas, Puerto Rico, and geographical locations in between. It's really, yeah, I would probably say that North America is probably the home base, simply because, as you can imagine, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for an organization based in India to fly me there when there are, I mean, from a cost perspective, but also there are so many quality consultants and facilitators in that geographical region for them to tap into. So, yeah.
Fair enough. But if a company wants to reach out to you from India, would you, kind of take it up as an opportunity, even if it's online? Would you be open to that? Towards having
Oh,
a
very much
discussion?
so. Yeah,
Absolutely.
very much so. And like I said, I've done that, and I'm definitely open to that, and do my best to facilitate a very connected event.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, I would never say to anybody, oh, well, no, I don't do online events because it's hard. I would never say that, right?
I know.
But there are
I
just
know.
those inherent challenges in
That's
that.
true.
But yeah, definitely. And so, yeah, people who are interested. I mean, um, I'm on LinkedIn as you are, and so would love to hear from anyone in your audience. Feel free to reach out, and
Yes.
if you want to connect, like mention that you heard Craig and I talking on this in this interview, and also on my website, so griffinleadership.com, Griffin spelled Gryphon leadership.com, and that's a great way to learn a little bit more about me and what it is that we're doing in the world. So yeah, I would love to get connected with people.
That's fantastic, Stephen. Well, all your details, contact details, will be present in the description of this video. So any viewer can just, and the viewers out there, if you want to connect with Stephen, please go ahead. I just know the conversation with him is going to add so much of value to you. So all his details are mentioned in the description of this video. Please go right ahead, connect over LinkedIn, or drop him an email, or check out his website and understand more of what Griffin Leadership is doing, what they can do, and what they are known for doing. Stephen, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for your time. India connects to Canada, and it's a good morning for you there. It's perhaps a good night for me here, but it's been such a lovely time, just understanding the power in leadership, the role in leadership. And I love that point, how you began today when you said, Craig, honestly, there's no difference between a large conglomerate where you work alongside with a lot of times, or even a mid-sized company or a small-sized company, because at the end of the day, we're all humans and we all have similar needs and similar desires.
Yeah. Well, Craig, thank you very much. And I am very sensitive and aware that it's very late where you are. So I'm grateful for your flexibility. And yeah, I've just really, like I said, I'm so happy to reconnect with you. And I always enjoy our conversation. So thank you for this opportunity.
Fantastic.